All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another awesome episode. We have another incredible guest with us today. We got Alex McBrairty in the house. He has his bachelor's in psychology, and he actually researched human motivation. So this is definitely going to be a good one. He also happens to be the owner of A-Team Fitness since 2014, and he's been featured on a few places you might be familiar with, like Fox, USA Today, Forbes, Men's Fitness, Runner's World, Yahoo, and Muscle and Fitness. So this guy is legit. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. You really did do your research. That's a lot of digging.
I take pride in these intros. I want to make sure that we start off on a high note.
Listen, the effort shows, my man. I appreciate it.
Of course, I appreciate it right back. So, you have been on one hell of a journey. I know I always kick it off with an origin story, and honestly, like digging into yours, I'm just ready to buckle up and hear more about it because you have one of the best that I've ever come across. Because, I mean, at first glance, people would probably see your pictures of like doing your bodybuilding shows back in the day or anything with a shirt off and be like, that dude's been ripped since freaking birth. He probably came out with a six pack, but not quite the case, right?
Not at all. Not at all. It's funny that you bring that up. I was just talking to someone today about the fact that why don't I use my story, my transformation journey more on social media and my whatever. And it's this kind of realization that the longer it's been since that's happened, not only have I grown as a person and less identify with that portion of my life, but I've also become so far removed, as you said, that people that meet me now, I'm at a place in my life, as you know, I just moved to your neck of the woods out in New Jersey from Michigan. So especially
right as I'm leaving.
Right? Where are you going?
I mean, by the time this airs, I'm going to be in North Carolina. So
I forgot you were moving to North Carolina.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's just how it goes.
Soon enough, I'll be down in South Carolina, so we'll be neighbors yet again.
There we go. We'll get a lift in beforehand, though.
But people that I meet here now, as you mentioned, probably just assume that I've been in shape, especially because this has been my full-time career for the better part of a decade. And so when I tell that story, I discover that people, because I'm so far removed, it's a little bit interesting for people to hear that story because it's harder for them to see that as the origin because it is so long ago and so different than what my life looks like now and then who I am as a person. But it is quite the story. So, I mean, is there anything specific that you want to know about?
Well, I mean, let's take it from the top. I mean, I know when I was looking into you, you hit like a weight of about 267 by age 17. Is that correct?
That is, yeah.
So, I mean, that's not exactly an ideal starting point for getting ripped and shredded.
Not at all. And it's really interesting because for as early as I can remember, I was always overweight. I don't remember a time as a child when I wasn't. And it really became noticeable to me as a child as a problem when I was about 11 years old because I went into the doctor's office for a normal checkup as you do every year. And they did as they do for children, the height weight chart percentile. Mm-hmm. And it was one piece of paper and it was height on top and weight on the bottom. And my weight was so high that it was actually in the height chart on the top half of the paper. And even as an 11-year-old, I mean, that was obviously something they were sharing with my parents, like, hey, we should really probably try working on this. But for me, even as an 11-year-old, seeing that, I was like, okay, that's not good.
Yeah. And I think those charts in particular like get a lot of crap like with BMI and things like that. But if we're being honest, for like kids and like general population, they're actually pretty useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this particular case, obviously with the percentiles, it's comparing it to like kids similar in age to me, like other kids my age are in my average, in my within the acceptable realms, which is really the case for any of those measures, as you mentioned, BMI, et cetera. It's really just like, are you relatively close to what you should be for that? And see it like, and I was a tall kid too, so the height was certainly high as well, but just to see the weight all the way up there, it was quite something. And so that kind of led to the realization in my head that, okay, there was a problem. And with that came its potential upside of, okay, this is something that needs to be worked on. But also the downside of that's when I became self-conscious. that's when it started to impact my self-esteem. And I was also something that a lot of people today would never realize. I was a very shy kid. Like my mom even will tell stories to this day now when I was very, very young, where if she was not in the room with me, temper tantrum, crying. Like I needed her there because I was so shy. So
Yeah.
as you might imagine, going through middle school, junior high, going through high school as the shy, overweight kid, not the best circumstances with which to do that, right?
Yeah.
So throughout that, my high school years, as I was really multiple attempts, kind of the same thing that even adults experience, where it was trying different diets. My parents did the best they could with the recommendations of the doctors, but there wasn't really a whole lot of information that they had. So it was trying different diets. It was my parents trying a diet and me doing it with them. It was trying to be more active and go to the gym and whatnot. And some of that stuff would work for a period of time. Get into a good routine for a little while, maybe go to the gym with my mom in the morning before school and lose 5-10 pounds over the course of a few, a couple of months or whatever. And then, as is typical, something would happen that would knock me out of that routine, or I'd be feeling great. I'd be like, this is cool. I don't have to wake up early tomorrow. I'll skip that day. And then one day turns into 2 weeks, turns into 2 months, turns into 2 years.
Yep, the vicious cycle.
Yeah, the bad vicious cycle. And it never quite stuck around until the end of my junior year in high school. It was the summer before my senior year. And I honestly, still to this day, there's a lot of like factors involved with what I would really attribute the transformation to. And it's funny because as I retell this story, as I go through life and get older, some of the meaning changes and I discover new things that might have been going through my head at that time with the perspectives that I have now. So back then, what I would have said was it was the culmination of a couple of things that really led to my motivation to take it seriously, do the transformation. The first was I got my first girlfriend. Important matter, right?
Everything a teenage dude needs to just put everything into place.
Tell you what, had to do it for the girl. So that was a huge motivator for me at the time. That was starkly different than any time before that. But then also, too, going into senior year, that's when all of my friends were applying to college. They were like planning their futures and really figuring themselves out. And I, at this point, didn't have any college plans, didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life, was really just kind of coasting through school. And I do, I'll give myself a little bit of credit of the luck of having at least enough maturity to have the realization that my adult life was getting ready to start. And even then, recognizing that if I didn't change something about my health in that moment, it would have only continued or gotten worse from that moment forward. And that terrified the shit out of me. So those things combined, the girl plus this realization of what was to come in the future, really like lit some fire that I had not experienced in the past. And that, I remember the date too, it was June 3rd, 2008 is when I started my fitness. And the rest from there.
Yeah. And now when your fitness journey kicked up, I know that like you said that like at certain points you were kind of at that like 2 to 3 times a day routine where it's like you're doing, say, like martial arts and running and lifting weights and stuff. And I think that's how a lot of people kind of dip their toes into the water when they're like, get fit, I'm just going to do all of it. So how did that go? I mean, being young, you can kind of pull it off, but how did that go?
So I can really tell you did your homework because that's very hard to find some of it. So I appreciate it. But you're absolutely right. So, as at the time, 17-year-old kid, in my mind, obviously had very limited information about nutrition, about exercise. I just knew everyone that I knew that was in great shape worked out a lot. So I was like, okay, that's where I'm going to start. And it's interesting because, I mentioned I started in June. So right at the end of the school year, going into summer vacation, I had just set a goal for myself over the course of the summer that I was going to work out every single day. And that was a combination of walking. That was a combination of trying to jog, which was its whole endeavor in and of itself, kind of building up to becoming a runner. Going to the gym and lifting weights from the experiences I had. I played a little bit of football in high school just for 1 year. So I had a little bit of experience lifting weights with the team then, and then also some gym classes. But what was interesting was I worked out every day for 3 months over summer. And in total, I had lost about 5 pounds, and I had not paid an ounce of attention to what I was eating. I was still doing all of the fast food. I was still doing all of the junk food. I was just not paying attention to it. And I remember towards the end of August when I realized I'd only lost 5 pounds with so much work that I was just like, what the hell? Like, this is not working. Like, this is super frustrating. And so then it was at that moment when I started to really begin to understand the importance of the nutrition. Like, I couldn't do this without fixing the way that I was eating. And so that in September, around that time, was when I started to really pay attention to my nutrition, started to learn a little bit more about it, dive into it a little bit more. And also what got me into the martial arts very quickly was actually I went with a group of friends to see the movie Never Back Down, which came out.
Oh my God. That is one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's a fantastic movie. Unfortunately, not a lot of people know about it, so I'm really glad that you do. But that
Oh yeah.
handedly inspired me to get into martial arts.
When you hear somebody go 7 years, you know exactly what they're talking about.
It's almost like its own secret handshake. It's, you understand, all right, I can get with this person because they so it was like the beginning of my senior year. It was paying attention to my eating. I was still now working out even more than I was before. I was in school, obviously full time as a senior. I actually got out a little bit early because I also worked bagging groceries at a local grocery store. So I could get school credit for that job, which means I could leave school a little earlier, which was fantastic. And so if I wasn't at school or working, I was essentially working out. So, and now I'll be the first to admit this is a very extreme approach, and I don't recommend this to anyone. But I'm 17 years old, got nothing to lose, very naive, and I'm like,
yeah, I think a lot of these approaches that people like glorify come from that age group that can pull it off. Because when you're that young, you could basically recover from anything. You could do 1,000 burpees a day and be waking up fresh as a daisy.
It's true, and it's funny because as I jumping ahead a little bit, as I got into college when I lost all the weight, I started running. There's something called streak running, which is these runners who run nonstop not nonstop, but they run every single day uninterrupted for years on end. And that was,
see, I thought that was going a different direction.
Most people do, so I had to leave you with a little bit of cliffhanger. But so essentially for 4 straight years, pretty much my entire undergrad university education, I ran 4 miles every single day, 7 days a week. And that, again, the only reason I could get away with that was because I was 18 years old. And even then, like, there were multiple stress fractures. There was like problems with my feet. There was ongoing pain, and still, again, not healthy, very crazy. Would do it every single day, no matter what. But that is another side story. But it was, yes, I would essentially go to school, and if I didn't work, I would go to the gym immediately after school. I would run 3 to 4 miles, walk, jog, eventually turning into running. And then I would come home. If I had work, I'd go to work. If I didn't, I'd come do homework. And then I'd go to the martial arts for 2 hours. And then I would often, from the martial arts, go back to the gym and lift weights for an hour. Get home at 10 p.m. Do that. I mean, I did that most days out of the week. I gave up my entire social life. I gave up everything. Like, I don't even think I went to a single high school party my senior year. It was just, again, not something I recommend from a sustainability standpoint, but in that time, it was like I just put everything I had into it. And so over the course of that 15 months, from that June to the following August, a few months after I graduated high school, I had lost about 85, 86 pounds.
Yeah. And that's just it's proof that even with like the quote unquote worst of plans, or the ones that aren't super intelligent, that aren't optimal, you can get a lot of results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely had to work 2 or 3 times as hard to get those results that quickly because I didn't have the knowledge. But it's true. You can make up with effort. It is just not worth the time nor the effort. Might as well just have a good plan and say,
yeah,
because that's definitely not something I would have been able to get away with. Even now, I mean, my entire career is fitness. My entire daily schedule is essentially revolved around my gym schedule. And even now, I wouldn't have been able to pull it off. Not a chance.
Nah. It's funny looking back, like you're in your 30s too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in our 30s, and I'm like, I look back at like 18-year-old me, and I'm like, I never would have done that. Like, I could never do that now. Looking back, I'm like, props to me. That definitely couldn't pull that off.
It's I mean, there's a lot of moments like that in my past as well. Many of the bodybuilding shows being one of them, but
That's the big one.
all character building, to say the least.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because I know you've trained for multiple things. Like you did bodybuilding, you did marathoning. Like what are those training styles like? What are some things that you learned? What are some things that you found like were I guess maladaptive maybe? Like what was the good and the bad of all that?
yeah, so I guess we'll go chronologically. We'll start with the marathon. So I am a runner still. I became a runner, like I said, I ran every day, 4 miles a day for 4 years straight. And I still do love to run for a couple of reasons. One, I find it very meditative. I'm the type of person, also as an entrepreneur, I know you'll understand this, there's always a million things going in my brain at one time. And
All right. Yep.
running is one of the few activities, even when I was younger, I discovered where while I'm doing it, there's enough, like the rhythmic motion of the running is enough to distract a lot of the like squirrel thoughts, I'll call them, so that I can actually just hone in and think about one singular thing in depth. And interestingly, that's part of what helped me with the everyday running in college, was that's how I studied for exams, is I would go for a run and I would just plug in and I would just think about the topics, whatever the test was about. And that's always served me really well. So that's one of the reasons that I still continue to do it. But probably the biggest reason was I grew up as the kid that couldn't do it. Like the first time I ran, my only goal was to go 5 houses to the end of the street. And even that was tough. So now that I have the ability, I enjoy doing that. But I never considered myself someone who would ever run a marathon. The only reason I did it, twofold. One, someone bet me that I couldn't. Again, that's an early...
Oh, mistake number one.
Right? But the second is I actually had a client at the time who was interested in running a marathon. And originally we were going to run it together. And then she had suffered some injuries that put her back. So she ended up running her marathon a year later. But then I still did it anyways because it was, for me, I had never trained anyone to run a marathon. So I needed to experience what it was like in order to really give her the proper training that she needed. So I did. I went out. It was September 2014. I did my first and only marathon. And probably the worst decision I ever made was to do it without training.
Ooh,
again,
that's brutal.
Something you could get away with in your early 20s. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. I made every mistake in the book you could possibly make. So when you want to talk about maladaptive training, one, the non-existent training. Now, granted, I had been running every day up to this point. I was, quote unquote, an experienced runner. My longest run prior to this was about a 16-mile run that I did a year and a half prior. A month before the race, I went out and I made a little half marathon loop in my neighborhood. And I set up in front of my house where I would pass occasionally a table of Gatorade Dixie cups so I could practice taking the cups while I was running. And so I did that about a month, and I was like, okay, if I can do this, I'll even attempt the marathon. And if I can't even do that, I'm not even going to try. Was sore for pretty much until the race after doing that. But I went into this with no training. I had no nutrition plan other than I'm just going to drink the Gatorade at every table and hope that that's enough to get me through. That did work, by the way. And I wore new running shoes that I had not broken in.
Oh my God. That sounds brutal.
By about mile 6, by about the 10K mark, my feet started hurting. And then from there, it just worked its way up my body. And I was able to make it the first 20 miles in about 3.5 hours, which is a respectable pace. And I'm proud of myself for that. But then I kid you not, Brian, at mile 20, I quite literally laid in the grass and I passed out for what I think was about 20 minutes. Interestingly, no one came to check on me. No one made sure I was okay. Fortunately,
Is that just normal in their space where it's like another noob?
I'm wondering this. But I remember waking up and it was, I timed the whole thing on an old school, like just normal stopwatch. So it was about 20 minutes that I was out. And I remember kind of hobbling over to the 20-mile aid station and they were, pouring the Gatorade in the Dixie cups. And I just sat there and kept drinking. I'm profusely apologizing. I'm sorry. She's like, oh no, please take as much as you want. I'll never forget. It was like a big, like gallon jug that you get at Costco of Gatorade, and I started helping her pour the Dixie cups, and then I just took the entire jug and I walked away.
It's like, I'll take this to go. Thanks.
Yeah. But I managed to run the remaining 6 miles. I did it in just over 5 hours, and I learned so much that then helped me train my client at the time to run the Chicago Marathon. This was just a marathon in Michigan, a local one. But she ran the Chicago Marathon. She did fantastic. We were able to train her properly, fuel her properly, make sure she didn't make any of the mistakes that I made. So that is probably one of the most physically grueling fitness challenges that I've done.
I bet. Now, if somebody's listening and they're like, I kind of want to do that, like I want to do a half or a full marathon, like what would a training plan look like? Because I know I've got a few runners and it's like strength training 2 days a week and then I leave their running to them. Like, what do you, being somebody who's done the thing, like what do you like to do as far as a programming standpoint?
Yeah, so this is really going to be dependent on their starting point. And so the biggest piece of advice I would give is give yourself a lot of time. Give yourself a lot of time to prepare for it, more than you think you need. Because things will, especially when you're training for this distance, there's inevitably going to have to be a buildup of endurance and stamina, not just cardiovascularly and lung capacity, but just the demands on your bones and on your muscles and like that, all the connective tissues of just that impact for that long.
Yeah. It's like that game day shape where it's like you start a sport and you don't feel right until a few weeks in.
Exactly. And so there's always going to be complications. Even like I said, when I was originally training this client for her marathon, she suffered an injury that forced us to push it back a year. But even within that extra year that we had, there were little minor injuries that popped up. There were weird. The craziest thing that she ever did as part of her preparation was she ran a half marathon on a treadmill while she was on vacation in Hawaii, which if you've ever run on a treadmill, the only thing longer than a treadmill minute is a microwave minute. And those things take forever. So I give her all the...
Maybe a plank minute.
Plank minute is up there too. I give her all the credit in the world for running that half marathon on a treadmill on vacation, nevertheless. But there were, other ailments and things we had to work through. So giving yourself plenty of time is going to ensure that when, not if, but when those minor things pop up, you have time to address it, recover from it appropriately, and still be able to meet your mark. Probably the most unintuitive thing that I would encourage people to think about if they're thinking about running a marathon is actually preparing themselves for how they'll handle the adrenaline in the beginning. Because the biggest thing with making it through a marathon race, and this is again dependent on your goal for the marathon. If your goal is to set a specific time, that's going to be different than if you're just trying to run it and finish it, right?
Yeah, more about the rhythm of things.
Yeah, the pacing of things. Having a
pacing, yeah,
that you've trained for, that you're comfortable with, that your body's prepared for. And I made this mistake when I did mine, and pretty much every race I've ever run since, is you got all the people around, there's the excitement, there's the nerves, there's a burst of adrenaline in the beginning. And especially too, I don't know if it's just the competitive side of me or if this is everyone, but when you're running with a lot of people, I kind of want to pass them. I want to get in front of them. And so there's a lot of, in the beginning, you're going to go too fast, too hard. You're going to be passing a lot of people. And then a couple miles in, you're going to realize you've already gassed yourself and you're way ahead of schedule. And that can throw off the entire race and make it far more miserable. So having a plan for knowing what to expect with that. So sometimes this is why a lot of people will run like practice races, and that will be an official, like a regular race, but it'll just be shorter. It'll be a half marathon if you're running a marathon. It'll be a 5K if you're running a half marathon. It'll be something short, but that's got the same elements of a race so that you can feel what that adrenaline feels like. And you can, learn how to adjust your pace accordingly or how you're going to measure it so that you're not overdoing it.
That's pretty interesting because it's the same like within powerlifting where it's like you do like a mock meet a few months out and you're like, kind of got to know what this is going to feel like because it's going to be a shock to the system a little bit.
Yeah, it's that's definitely not something you want to discover your first time when you're doing the thing,
No. But that's the difference between having a coach and like going in fresh and by yourself. When you do it yourself, you make the same mistakes everybody else makes.
Yeah, it's definitely not a good time when that happens, for sure.
Yeah.
But that definitely physically grueling fitness endeavor that I've done.
Okay. That's a more power to you, because that's one of those things I don't think I'll ever touch in my lifetime, but respect the hell out of the people that do it. I mean, there's a lot to be learned in any fitness endeavor, so that's a huge one. And I know I got a lot of clients listening right now. They're probably like nodding their heads when you were saying the mental clarity aspect and everything. That they're like, "Yep, see, I told Brian this. I told him this is why I run." But I know that with all of this going on, like, you had some setbacks yourself. And I know one of the big ones in your journey was like a serious head injury, which kind of had you reevaluating things a little bit. So what was that experience like when you're like this super fit guy that like could literally do anything, and then you're out of commission?
Yeah. You really did your homework. I'm impressed.
I want the Sean Evans reaction here. Like on Hot Ones, everybody's like, damn, you really dug deep. And I'm like, that's what I'm going for.
Well, you succeeded, my man. You succeeded. No, the head injury was a very pivotal moment for me. And it actually led into a lot of what led me to do the few bodybuilding shows that I did. We'll talk about that later. But so the circumstances around the head injury was I was deadlifting in the gym and I was going for a PR, which at the time was 435, and had belted up, went for it, got about halfway up, felt a little tweak in my back, realized I wasn't going to get it, so I set the weight down. And as I'm standing up, I'm realizing that if I kind of keep holding my breath, my back doesn't hurt. So I'm still kind of holding, I'm standing up, kind of evaluating what's the damage here, what are we doing? Can I stand up straight? What's the deal? And it just so happens that I started to undo the belt, and I must have exhaled at the exact moment I was releasing the pressure from the belt. And so it was just all that pressure buildup suddenly goes away and out like a light.
Oh.
And fell, according to those that were around me. Fortunately, I was in a small training studio that I was coaching clients out of at the time. And the only other people in the gym was one of the other trainers, the trainer that owned the facility, and one of his clients. They were the only other people in the building. And according to them, when I passed out, I fell over and I hit my head on a 100-pound dumbbell that was like a hex dumbbell that was on the ground next to me.
Oh.
Gashed in the back of the head. I'll spare everyone else the rest of the details. Sort of comically, when I came to, all I remember is feeling like I had just woken up from a night of sleep. So I woke up, bright lights from the sun coming through the windows of the gym, which had giant floor-to-ceiling windows in front. And then the owner of the gym standing over me. And we still laugh because the first words I uttered to him were, "What the hell are you doing in my bedroom?" And he was like, "Oh, like, calm down. No, pass out. You okay? We're don't check it." And so I called a friend to come pick me up and took me to the emergency room just to get looked at. They did the standard concussion test protocol, and they're like, "No, you passed all the tests. Like, eyes are able to follow things. There's no light sensitivity. Like, you're good." I was most definitely not good. And I definitely felt a little shaken up and a little off. And it wasn't until I got home later that afternoon where I was making lunch. I was baking chicken in the oven, and I had bent over to take the tray out of the oven, and suddenly the entire room started spinning. And it was this really intense episode of vertigo, which I had never experienced until this moment at the time. And it was just this very nauseating, disorienting, like quite literally spinning of the room. And so a few minutes later, it subsided. But what I ultimately discovered was, and I still don't know the exact mechanism because I never went back to the doctor. Totally don't recommend that. But whenever my head wasn't completely vertical, I would get these very intense episodes of vertigo and everything would spin. And again, only something that one would be stupid enough and be able to pull off is even knowing that information. I was back at the gym that evening training clients and teaching classes and doing the whole ordeal. And so that continued to progress. Now, for context, obviously that in and of itself would be scary enough, life-altering, definitely not a good time. But for context, if you remember the swine flu 2008, 2009 deal, a couple members of my family had caught it, and my older brother at the time, had gotten swine flu, and one evening he was walking to the bathroom to take some medicine because he wasn't feeling well, and one of the symptoms of that was like this very intense, very sudden fatigue. And so what happened is he was basically standing in the bathroom, taking some medicine, and he passed out. And when he fell, he hit the front of his head on the bathroom counter, and that pinballed him back, where he hit the back of his head on the wall before he came.
Oh.
And from that, among other head injuries, we're a head injury prone family apparently, he suffered what's called post-concussive syndrome. And for those who may not be familiar, post-concussive syndrome, they understand it a little bit more now, but they still don't understand the mechanism for why it occurs. But it's essentially somebody who suffers a concussion, and then they continue to experience concussion-like symptoms after the initial injury is healed. And it can continue on for a few weeks. It can continue on for a few years. It can go on for the rest of your life. There's no...
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard that it's like, it's very prevalent, especially in women. Like they really have a longer time frame when it comes to recovering from concussions.
You know, that I don't know. But so I can't speak on that specifically.
Okay, because I remember training young athletes, like that was like a thing. A lot of the lacrosse players we had, they're like, it takes some women 6 to 9 months to get over a concussion, and men like are like a few months.
I mean, that would be shocking, and it's wild with head injuries, just everything that is involved with that. And so my brother suffered post-concussive syndrome when we were in college, so he's a year older than me. And at the time, they definitely knew nothing about it. So there was a lot of, my mom flew him out to Chicago, where she was living at the time, to see a bunch of neurologists and specialists and figure out. They were basically putting him on a cocktail of medications for the side effects instead of the actual intentions of the drugs, because that was the only way they could only treat the symptoms. They couldn't really resolve anything. And so he ended up having to take a year off of school. It pretty much changed the rest of his life. And fortunately, he was able to get it under control enough to come back to school, finish his degree, and it certainly didn't impact his intelligence at all, because he got his degree in biophysics. He now works in the biomedical field. I still don't know what he does.
That's just life leveling the playing field. Like, this guy's a little too smart. We got to bring him down a notch.
We got to bring him down. He's still far smarter than me with his ongoing head injuries, which he was one of the permanent cases. But it's much more controlled now, and it's just a lifetime of migraines and dealing with all those issues. But in recollecting his experiences going through that now, 5 or 6 years later, experiencing this vertigo, and at the time I was sleeping in a recliner because I couldn't lay in a bed or else everything would spin. And so I remember like being just terrified that this was going to be the rest of my life. Like I couldn't work out. I was working, but like hardly, and I probably shouldn't have been. I couldn't do anything social because I literally was just like stuck in this recliner, trying not to move my head so that the whole room wouldn't spin. And it was where it became a pivotal moment in my life. And some of my older clients, in-person clients from that time period, we joke about the before head injury times and the after head injury times. Because I remember there was a moment where I was sitting in my living room on a recliner, middle of the night. I think like the show The Blacklist was on, if you're familiar with that show at all, which is a great show, I will say. And I just remember feeling so sorry for myself and thinking that if I just, as a miracle, got better and this wasn't permanent, that I was going to sort of do life differently. I was going to embrace it a little bit more. I was going to really push myself. I was going to kind of stop leaving things on the table. I was going to do whatever I could to make the most out of my life experience if I got better. And fortunately, I did get better. I'm completely better. Have no issues with vertigo at all anymore. It was a period of a couple of months of it kind of slowly and gradually improved over time. Like there was a period of time where I could lay down in my bed and go to sleep, but if I rolled over in the middle of the night, then I'd wake up and it would spin and I'd have to do whatever. But
yeah,
it was just that moment, I think, of like because at the time my entire identity was fitness. As an early 20-year-old fitness coach, that's all I knew. It was eat, sleep, breathe, the gym. All I talked about was fitness and PRs. All I talked about was supplements. Like, that was every early 20s fitness person's lifestyle, right?
We've all been there.
Yeah, right. It's the phase you got to go through, and hopefully you
Yep.
don't just get stuck there. But that's
Some guys and ladies are still stuck there. It's a little concerning.
absolutely right. And so I think the big thing for me was feeling like my entire identity was taken away from me, and now suddenly I felt like I had nothing. So it was this sort of realization that I also wanted. That was the moment where I wanted to discover. I think that's what kicked me out of my gym bro phase. But it was also just this recognition that, like, okay, this can all be taken away so easily. So if I get the chance to just be 100% and do it again, I'm going to really make the most of it. And that's pretty much been the guiding principle for everything that's happened since.
Yeah. And I know that, like, when it comes to things that you've like dipped your toes in and really ran with, I always see on your social media some form of dancing. Have there been anything, is there anything else that you've like kind of dove into and you're like, all right, I'm doing this now. I'm doing this now.
Oh, so many things. So many things. So I have a bit of an adventurous spirit for this reason. So I guess as the highlight reel of it's pretty much anything that interests me, I go do it. Like I wanna
Yeah. Like running with the bulls.
I did go running with the bulls in Spain. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've dabbled in flying them, although I've not gone so far as to get my pilot's license. Unfortunately, I didn't fly and jump at the same day. Not to speak on my terrible piloting skills. I've gotten certified in scuba diving. I've gone dog sledding. I've done a lot of traveling throughout Europe, some of which included going completely on my own. As you mentioned earlier, I've learned how to salsa and bachata dance. And so it's pretty much just this past August, I was in Hawaii with my girlfriend and we went rappelling over a waterfall. So it's just like literally anything that excites me, that's got some modicum of an adventure to it, I'm in for it.
Nice. Now, with all that being like this new phase of life where it's like, all right, I'm more focused on living life rather than living in the gym. Like, how did your training and nutrition change around all that? Because I think when we do get out of that gym bro phase, all of a sudden it's like, oh, not every macro freaking matters. And it's like, I don't have to feel bad if I miss a workout. Like, how did that change for you?
Yeah. So I guess to give you the background for this brings us full circle to the bodybuilding, because it was actually my second bodybuilding show where that change of my fitness routine really began to take hold. So very briefly, my first fitness show, which I fully admit I decided to do when I was on vacation drunk and I was in really good time and I was feeling myself, and me and a buddy of mine.
That's when the best decisions are made.
Listen, I tell you what, we had been having a couple of cocktails by the pool, hanging out at the bar, and we were feeling really good. We were both really lean and, had kind of done a summer shred. And we decided, like, dude, we could totally do a show. Let's do a show. And so this might have been like a July 4th weekend. We decided to do our first show that October. It was October 2016. And that for me, though, that was the precipice that decided for me to actually do the show. But as I continued to train for it and got closer to it, ultimately what that was for me was what I call laying to rest of fat Alex. So up to this point, this is still not so, this is maybe 5 or 6 years removed from my fitness transformation, losing the nearly 100 pounds. But there were still a lot of elements of that life that stuck with me: the insecurities, the self-esteem, the being self-conscious to take my shirt off at the pool, or this, that, or the other, no matter how good a shape I might have been in. And so, as you and the listeners could probably imagine, the most terrifying thing for someone who's overweight to think about experiencing is stepping half naked on a stage in front of an audience of strangers, being judged entirely based on how your body looks. That's quite literally the most terrifying thing. And so, as I was preparing for the show, for me, it was like the overcoming of all of the previous insecurities I had, all of the shame that I felt, or the terrible things that I would think about myself, the negative self-talk, whatever, the version of me, the overweight version of me, the unhealthy version of me that still kind of mentally stuck around, that inner voice. This was I'm putting all that behind me. So that first show and the training that went into that was just stepping out, overcoming that fear, closing the chapter of that part of my life and putting it in the past. And that was a fantastic experience. What changed my fitness training was the second show, which the only reason I decided to do the second show was because I had to come back and do better, right? The first show was just, don't be the one that embarrasses himself. Like, at least I want to like I was there, even if I did.
Just don't get last in your class. That's it. Just don't get last in your class.
And fortunately, I did not get last. So that was a success. So when I came back again, about a year and a half later, I was like, okay, I'm going to do better this time. That's all I want. I don't care how, obviously I want to win, but I just want to do better. And I think the first show I got 5th in my class, and then the second show I got 4th in my class. So technically I did do better. Not by much, but a little bit. And, but the pivotal moment for me in the second show training was like 2 or 3 weeks before show. I remember I was in the gym, and these were 3-hour workouts every day, 90 minutes to 2 hours of lifting, an hour of extra cardio on the Stairmaster after. And because I was a coach at the time, I would usually be in there late morning, afternoon. And that's when all of the other fitness coaches are there. All of the fitness competitors are there. Like, that's when you see the same faces. Everyone's training for the same show because it was a small local show. So you see all the same people. And I'll never forget that 2 or 3 weeks before the show, I'm dead tired, fatigued. There's no personality left. I'm just grudging.
For anybody listening right now that follows anybody who's like super shredded for a show, just know this is hell. Like, you feel like death. The better you look on show day, the more hell you put yourself through.
It is not a fun experience. And so it's funny because the marathon to me was the most physically grueling fitness endeavor. This was the most mentally grueling fitness endeavor. Because you're just
it's a 24/7 sport. You got to pay attention to everything that goes in your mouth, every movement you take.
It's so hard. But I remember on a Stairmaster, and the way the gym was set up is the Stairmaster's kind of, you overlooked the entire gym floor. And I'm sitting there and I'm miserable and I'm tired and I don't want to be there anymore. And it's the middle of the day and I see the same faces, same competitors, and they're all talking to each other about their routines. They're talking to each other about their posing. They're talking to each other about their show schedules, all the shows that they're intending to do even after this one. And I don't know what came over me, but I had just this moment of epiphany of, this is all that they have. And that's great if it's your thing. Like, bodybuilding is your sport, and you eat, sleep, and breathe bodybuilding, 24/7 sport. If you want that to be a 24/7, I give you so much props for that. But I realized I did not want that to be my life. And so I remember just this clarity of like, I have to finish the show because I'm not going to be this miserable and have nothing to show for it. But afterwards, I'm never doing this again. Like, I'm done with this. And I think that was a great moment to have because I could step away from that activity and not feel like I needed to keep doing it or not feel the pressure to keep doing that. And it was that realization where I really marked the shift in how I approached my own training. There was less of PRs are great, but there was less of a specific emphasis on hitting PRs with regular intervals. There was less rigidity in the exercises that I selected. Like, I used to be that guy that if I wasn't deadlifting, then it wasn't a real workout. Or if I wasn't, going for heavy singles on a barbell squat, it wasn't a real workout. Some of that powerlifting, cross training, like ego lifting.
Fun stuff.
Okay. Yeah, definitely very fun stuff. But it was like all the time. If I'm not doing this, it's not if I don't do a big compound movement at the beginning of my workout, it's not a real workout sort of deal. So I started to loosen up those restrictions a little bit. I started to get more flexible in my training. If something was busy, I wouldn't wait 20 minutes for it. I'd go do something else. And that has led to really my approach to training now, which is in much my nutrition approach as well, which is very much just, obviously I like looking good. I like being able to do things. I like feeling strong, and I like seeing progress both in my lifts, in my runs, and the things I'm able to do. But my specific fitness goal, as I would explain it now, which I haven't had a specific fitness goal since that fitness show, to be quite honest. For me now, it's just, I want to be able to do or participate in any activity that I want at any moment without having to worry about if I can. So all of those sort of adventure activities that I mentioned to you earlier, running with the bulls, rappelling over the waterfalls, going dog sledding, jumping out of planes, all that stuff were things that I could decide to do without worrying if I was able. And that's like the only criteria of my training.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy how a lot of trainers kind of go through that life cycle. Like I'm kind of in the same place now where it's like, I just want to be able to say I can literally do anything. Want to play a flag football game? Great. I can do it without pulling a hammy. Or it's like, want to go swimming? Sure. I can do that without dying.
Right. And it's just, and again, this is also my experiences being overweight and being restricted in what I could physically do. It's in the head injury and being everything I was able to do suddenly taken away from me. It was just, I want to be able to experience everything that life has to offer in the ways that I want to experience it. And I don't want to feel held back by anything.
Exactly. Now, how has that bled over into the way you train and coach clients on nutrition? Because I know sometimes we could get bogged down with our personal way of doing things and it bleeds into what we tell the clients. So, how is that transition?
So the best way I would explain it, and I'll be the first to say that my particular style of coaching and the way we do it in our program, again, given my background in psychology, it is very much life coaching disguised as fitness coaching. I hate using the term life coaching because I think it's been misused a lot, and you get a certain connotation.
Well, it's funny. The people that say they're life coaches don't even do it well. Like the people that are fitness coaches usually do it the right way.
Absolutely. And so we're very careful not to use that term, but if I'm being completely honest, it is life coaching disguised as fitness coaching. So what that means in our program is our ultimate goal as coaches is to help the people that come into the program discover who they want to be in the life they want to have. Like truly. Not just I want to weigh a certain amount, not just I want to not hate what's in the mirror. It's no what's going to come of this. Like what sort of their version of I want to be able to do and make full use of what life has to offer. Like, what is the version of that for you? And then that ultimately influences everything that happens thereafter. The way that we train them, the way that we coach their nutrition, what strategies we use to help them suffice that. So I'll give you a clear example of this. There was a guy that came into our program. He lives out in LA. He's kind of living that typical actor, comedian, producer lifestyle. And he wanted to lean out a little bit and he wanted to build a little bit of muscle. And he was a college football player that has since started his career at acting. And one of his jobs was he ran a YouTube series food review channel for restaurants in the greater LA area. So
That is a great idea.
it's a fantastic job. I'll tell you what, I was jealous of it every time. I still watch every episode. But his literal job is to go eat at restaurants. So him coming in with this weight loss goal, I couldn't tell him to stop eating at restaurants, which is the easy advice to give to anyone who wants to lose weight, because it does work. But in this particular case, that was not the life that he lived. That was not the life that he wanted. He was a foodie. He was a big cook. He was on a number of, there was a holiday themed cooking challenge show on, I forget the specific network. It might have been on the Oprah network, the Oprah Winfrey network, that he was on. That he
Oh, wow.
And so, like, this is very much part of his identity. And so when he came in and the strategies that we use, like in his particular case, we did utilize strategies from intermittent fasting, being strategic in his meal timing so that he could essentially have these bigger, higher calorie meals and not have it impact the other goals that he wanted. And for him, it worked beautifully. And that's exactly what he needed for that lifestyle, for what he wanted to live. But that's not something we recommend to everyone, right? Like there's very few people on our program recommend intermittent fasting style protocols to. So it's very much, we start with the person. Who do they want to be and what type of life do they actually want to have? And that process, to be quite honest, in and of itself can take some time because not everyone knows the answers to those questions. And so there's some trial and error involved, and there's a lot of discovery, there's a lot of discussion to kind of help explore what those things are. But ultimately, the answers to those questions then dictate how they're training, how they're eating, what it all looks like.
Yeah, because that's a true motivation, right? If we're actually talking about the psychology of things, like people mistake inspiration for motivation, but like the real motive behind what we're doing and why we're doing it is that like goal of what we're chasing.
Really, absolutely. And I think it's people get lost in, as you kind of alluded to, people get lost in the superficial version of that. They think that's the answer, that their motivation, when it's really not. It's something else.
Yeah.
And that's where it can be challenging to really, and that's where the background psychology helps to really try to dig into that and figure out and help people have those epiphanies, similar to what I did with the head injury, but sans the head injury. Like, are you doing what you actually want to be doing? And that's also why it really is life coaching, because it's figuring out what kind of life you want to have. And then how do we prepare you to actually step into that identity?
Exactly. Now, if somebody's listening and they're like, damn, how do I do that? Because, like, I know I talk about like the why method where you say, like, just kind of go down the rabbit hole of why until you get to the real answer. Are there any other methods you've seen work really well for somebody getting real clarity on like what exactly they're going after?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I would keep in mind. The larger arching theme, which is similar in nature to your consistently asking why for multiple steps, is a concept we use in our program called radical introspection. Because I think the number one skill that people need to develop in order to discover this about themselves is to be able to have the self-awareness to know whether they're doing the things that are actually fulfilling them and that they actually want, or if they're doing something because they think they should be doing it, or someone else told them they should be doing it, or for some other reason. And so radical introspection is our version of developing self-awareness. It's practices and again, you're asking why is part of this. It's being more introspective, checking in on why you're doing what you're doing, asking those why questions. Why do I want these things? Why am I doing these behaviors? What's the purpose for this? And radical in the sense that often we have to do this even when we don't like the answers. Because that's what trips a lot of people up. They're happy to be introspective about their good qualities, but it's very difficult for a lot of people, myself included, and really everyone, to be self-aware about their bad qualities.
Well, that's where the justification comes in, right? Where it's like, well, it's not that bad because.
Tell you what, we're all Jedi masters when it comes to tricking ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
So being able to lower that veil and actually have a very clear vision of an awareness of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and understanding your own motivations and your own drives is a big crucial component to developing self-awareness that allows one to really understand. Outside of that, a little bit more practically, we do have a process that we take people through where there's a series of questions. It's essentially a method for uncovering people's core values, which I think is a very, essentially we can think of them as the northern lights that can guide people to living the life that they want. There's a series of questions about like what moments in your life have left you the most fulfilled or the most energetic, or what do you find meaningful in life? What's important to you? What were the moments that you found most important to you? It's a series of questions similar to that. And what we do is we kind of aggregate all that data and we draw with them, we do this together, we draw common themes amongst all the different answers they've given to try to discover where the connection is between all these different elements. And from that, with enough back and forth, we start to figure out what some of those core values might actually be. And once we discover what that is, of course, we have to kind of pit them against each other because we want to categorize them by level of importance. So we kind of pit them against each other and figure out which one's actually the most important to them and which one's lesser, to kind of dwindle it down to this list of anywhere from 3 to 5 strong core values that they feel connected to, that they feel driven by, that they feel really defines the life that they want to have. And that then begins to help us figure out, okay, how do we satisfy more of those via our training, via our nutrition, via the way we implement these things, via everything else you're doing in your life? How do we live by those values a little bit better?
Love that. Because I think that's the level of like going deep that people need to do on their journey that they just don't. And that this is why they keep stopping and restarting, because they've never really addressed what exactly it is holding them back. It's not the right macros. It's not the right types of foods. It's like, what is driving that behavior?
Absolutely. And so, and I can't even stress enough how powerful it is and how much clarity you get when you understand your core values. So I'll give you a very clear example. My number one top core value is personal growth. That to me is the single driver. That's why I've done all these different unique activities, gone on these adventures. It's for me, I want to constantly be growing. in becoming a better version of myself. Now, I was still working with a woman, and we were just having a conversation a couple of days ago where her story, she's a little bit older than me, so I guess it's fair to say my story mimics hers, almost identical, in the sense that she ran a couple of marathons with some ailments that prevented her from doing so, but she pushed through and did it anyways. She did a couple of bodybuilding shows. She ended up going into more strongman competitions, strong woman competitions, and doing that sort of stuff. But she's always been this kind of athlete in all these different endeavors. And we were talking about one of the things that I encourage the members in our program to do is to actually showcase their achievements somewhere in their home. Like in my office, I have my marathon medal right there. I got a couple other achievements on the wall as a visual reminder of past success. So, for example, when I'm sitting here working on a new project or trying to do something I've never done before, and I feel that imposter syndrome, I feel that self-doubt, I can have these visual reminders of like, you've already accomplished all these things. There's no reason you can't accomplish this as well. And her and I were talking about that concept, and she felt very differently about those visual reminders because for her, she felt like it was a reminder of her failure to not still be competing in the sport, not still be running marathons, not still be doing bodybuilding competitions, not still being as lean as she was when she was doing the bodybuilding competition, or as strong as when she was doing the strong woman competitions. And that led, of course, to this discussion about the core values and helping her realize that she was feeling bad about not doing those sports because she didn't realize it wasn't the sports themselves that's what she valued. It was the challenge. It was growing as a person. It was following through on competing and completing that task, that journey on that self-discovery path that was ultimately what was important to her. And so understanding that it wasn't the accomplishments of the sports, it was the fact that she did them and then outgrew them that was the meaningful thing. And so this really highlights, understand what your values are. It allows you to really make sense of all these things that might be weighing us down because we can really understand the meaning behind it all and where we're going. Not only the meaning of past things, but where we're going and where we should be going.
Yeah, and it really does highlight a lot of the false beliefs too that like we catch going through our minds day to day where it's like I keep thinking this but it's not really lining up with my values. It's not really that true, but I keep thinking it.
Yeah. And I think that gets a lot of people in trouble. And to your point, that's exactly right. People will often feel anxiety or feel negative emotions about feeling a certain way or not feeling a certain way, in part because of what other people have told them they should feel instead of understanding how they actually feel about it or whether they should.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like those ugly words that we don't want in our vocabulary, the should, could, woulds.
Right.
It's like, according to who?
Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, that identifying and understanding what your specific core values are, is it allows you to define what living life well means, to actually understand what that means for you so that you start playing by the rules that you've set for yourself instead of somebody else's rules.
Love that. Love that. And now I want to be respectful of your time. And I know we covered a lot of really good stuff, but I got to ask you one final question to wrap this all up. Here, we always ask a question for the next guest without knowing who that guest is. So I'm going to get yours once we're all done, but this one comes from our most previous guest, Jackie Linder, who is an incredible, she's a nurse and midwife who is very, very knowledgeable on menopause, birth, and all that stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, go check it out right after this. But Jackie asks, what book has had the most influence on your life and why?
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's a great question. And there's a lot. The most impact on my life. Okay.
I know as a self-development guy, you've got to have some really good ones in the back pocket.
That's the problem, is I have so many good ones. But if I'm going to be fair and I'm going to pick the one that had the biggest impact on my life, which might actually be a little controversial because I know people either love it or they hate it. And I think for me, if I were to reread it now, I'd probably be in the hate it camp. But I think at the time in my life, which was actually during my head injury when I read it, is the Mark Manson book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And that was, again, if you think about the context, head injury, identity taken away from me, trying to rebuild or rediscover and recreate what my life is going to look like. And that was a pivotal moment reading that book of figuring out what was worth paying attention to and what was worth caring about and what was worth discarding. And so I think because I was at that pivotal moment of redefining what everything meant, I was at the most opportune time to discard so many wasteful or unneeded elements of not only my life, the negativity, but also of who I was as a person that was not serving me well. And so for that reason and for that time period, that's the book I'm going to give.
Love that. I know I gave that a read a while back, and I did a back-to-back with Essentialism, and I'm like, I'm really clearing out the closet with all this.
Would have been high on my list as well, actually.
Yeah, they're both really good. But I mean, by the end of it, you're just like, man, I really only give a shit about myself and my family. I don't really care about, and my clients. I don't really care about anybody else.
It's true. But even knowing that gives you the opportunity to kind of relinquish any negative emotions you might feel. Like my girlfriend asks me all the time, and I think she just assumes it's because I'm Midwestern. If we're out and someone's being really rude to us, or we're not, for some reason they're being rude, I'm like the most chill person about it. She always said, like, I usually have some sort of joke or something I can say that kind of diffuses the situation, and then they turn around and they're starting to be nice to us. And every time she just looks at me like, what just happened? What do you? And it's because I don't really care that someone's rude to me. You know, like it has nothing to do with me. So I'm gonna keep doing me. But again, it goes back to just knowing what you care about and what you don't. You know,
Exactly. It's a much better way to live. It's just so much less stressful.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, I mean, this has been a blast. I know we covered so much good stuff, and I'm very, very happy that everybody got to learn a lot from your journey and the things that you've been through, because there's so many valuable lessons in that. Now, if anybody did hear a really good, valuable lesson and something just like hit them hard and they're like, wow, this was great, go ahead and send it to somebody that you know has to hear it too. And then me and Alex say thank you in advance. But if you want, tag us on Instagram or something, and that way we could start a conversation even better. So if they want to catch you on somewhere like Instagram, where else can they find you?
Well, they can check out what we're doing at 18 Fitness at 18fit.com. Otherwise, I definitely recommend following me along on Instagram for more fitness psychology tips, for dancing videos. As we mentioned, I salsa and bachata. I always like to post that stuff to try to keep it entertaining.
This guy's got some hips, people. Get ready.
It's been a long road. But it's a lot of fun. It's a great connection tool. It's been the sole driver of my social life here in New Jersey since I've been here. So I owe dancing a lot. So definitely follow me on Instagram. Feel free to shoot me a DM anytime. Questions. If you want to know more, if you have questions about any of the crazy activities, maybe you're thinking about trying some of it yourself, I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Awesome. And just so you guys know, as always, you don't have to go searching anywhere. Just go to the show notes. I'll put all of his links down below so you can check them out. All right. Well, Alex, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate you spending your time with us. And to everybody listening, thank you for this time. Always all same time, same place. But until then, go kick some ass. See you later.